Hi everyone, so welcome to another episode of Rabbi React, and this time we're going to start talking about biblical archaeology. Now that is very exciting because the Bible spans several centuries, in fact millennia, describing lots of different events, and archaeology unearths events from the past. And whilst, unless you've got a specific writing telling us about a specific event, you can't always precisely correlate, we can start to look for to what extent do we have things that seem to fit the biblical history, to what extent do we not. And especially in recent centuries, there's been a lot of discussion and debate about the veracity of Torah, and a lot of critics bring in archaeology very often as an argument to say certain things just aren't true. But I want to share something really exciting that's happened or come to light actually over several years now, and it's coming to light even as we speak. There's articles coming out in new publications from the Timna Copper Mines. Now, why are Timna Copper Mines important? And I'll tell you why. Because for a long time, critics of the Bible have argued certain things just can't be correct. And there's lists of them, but among them are, number one, the sheer size of the Israelites who leave Egypt, whether it's 600,000, whether that's just the men between 20 and 60, and maybe millions of people, or even if it's a smaller number, whatever one wants to say, this idea of a large population of nomads traveling through the Sinai desert and deserts for 40 years, entering the land of Canaan, should have a very big archaeological footprint. And yet, although the whole Sinai desert hasn't been completely unearthed, nevertheless, it seems that we have such a lack of information, lack of archaeological findings there, that it could never have happened in any form with any significant numbers for that sort of time as the Bible, as the Torah describes. That's one argument. Another is that the books like Genesis and so on have to have been written much later than they purport to. They purport to be reporting events back in the first millennium BCE, but have been written down by, let's say, the 13th century BC or something like that, when the Torah says it's given. And yet, it's got things a lot about Edomites. It even talks about kings, lists of kings who ruled in Edom before anybody ruled in Israel. And yet, archaeologically, and you'll see this in minimalists famous, including some really brilliant archaeologists like Israel Finkelstein, the book The Bible Unearthed, and others. And they'll talk about the fact that there isn't an Edomite kingdom until about the 7th, maybe 8th century BC, centuries after these events. So it must be a much later author who's projecting backwards and imagining things. So what happened in the Timna Valley? Well, Timna is just a little bit north of Eilat. If you travel in Israel down south from the main country towards Eilat, you hit eventually the Timna area. And there's an archaeologist from Tel Aviv University called Erez Ben Yosef who's been doing a lot of work in that area. There's also another team from California University just across the Jordanian border. And together what they discovered is these mines, copper mines. Now it was known for a while there are ancient copper mines in the area, but they never really linked them to the Edomite kingdom. Now through rigorous carbon dating and analysis of all the materials and so on, several things have come to light. It's clear it's the Edomite kingdom. What makes it clear it's a kingdom, I'll come to in a minute, but it's clear that it dates back much earlier than thought. In fact, there is a massive technological explosion that happens as far back as the 10th century BCE, just within striking distance of the Torah, and obviously the Edomites were there long before that too. But what's incredible is this. We may only have known from the archaeology and the finds until now about 7th century Edomite, several centuries later. But what we now see is they must have had a massive kingdom earlier. How do we know? Because first of all, they have thousands and thousands. I think in the Timna area alone, it might be something like 100,000 mine shafts over a 100-year period, which means you're talking about 100 shafts a year. There's a huge amount of digging going on, which means you have to be able to control a massive workforce. You probably have slaves in there and workers in there, which means now to support them and feed them, you have to control a far more vast area of farmers, hunters, gatherers, whoever it is who collect food, tax them on their surplus to be able to feed all these enormous amounts of workers. You're looking at a colossally sized kingdom, which first of all means that there really was an Edomite kingdom going back centuries before we've seen them, and no doubt centuries before that too. Second of all, and this is really important, and Erez Ben Yosef has actually written this up, I believe, and others have written about it in popular media, although I don't think it's made an enormous splash. It means we now know that you can have a massive centralized kingdom, but if the people don't build cities and permanent residencies in cities and towns, but instead are nomadic or semi-nomadic, they can exist and not leave an archaeological trace. If they had not dug the mines in Timna, we would not know this huge kingdom existed for centuries. And what that means is we now know and can see firsthand that in the ancient time you can have an enormous population for centuries that is archaeologically invisible if they're nomadic. Now think about ancient Israelites. Of course we can have equal in archaeological invisible enormous population moving through Sinai for just a few decades, then arriving in the land of Canaan until they actually start settling in the cities, which the Bible seems to indicate is not for quite a few centuries after the arrival. We're just not going to see them. It seems any real proper strong settlements do generally get the type of finding that you can really easily find centuries later. You do sometimes find in nomadic camps and things, but you can literally have an entire population that's archaeologically invisible. And that forces a rethink of lots of assumptions in the ancient world, of all population sizes, because archaeologists have kind of assumed there were tiny nomadic populations like today, and we now suddenly have seen a blow-away piece of evidence that shatters all of that. Now, why is that exciting? I think it's a lot of excitement. First of all, those of us who care about archaeology and think about this tend to get quite excited by these things. I got into archaeology a bit because a great aunt of mine, she should be well, had a lot of her career as an archaeologist. But I also find it fascinating. We dig the ground and we find things, or we don't. We can test, do these verses line up? What's going on over here? Does this work? Does it not work? But I think in recent years and decades, there's been a big swing back from a skepticism, which still exists in lots of circles, several decades ago, where they were really minimalizing so much of the Bible. And today, lots and lots and lots of things have been found that correlate and corroborate enormous parts. Obviously, archaeology can't prove that it's true, certainly not the miracles, but they can show the authenticity of the stories that are being told, the dating being right, the details being right. And the Edomite one is a big deal, and one that's very exciting. Exciting for those of us who love the idea that we can go to the ground and see things that tell us live, these are the people the Bible's talking about. And exciting for those of us who may have been hearing all these, the Bible's not true because this, that, and the other. And actually, no, we've just changed the whole picture in one enormous set of finds. So that's one piece. I'm going to hopefully talk about lots of other exciting areas, controversial areas, and interesting areas. I hope you're as excited as I am about this, and I hope to see you on future episodes. Hi everyone, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, please click on the like and subscribe and hit the notification button below. Thanks so much.